The moment Denzel Washington stepped onto the set of Piers Morgan and censored, the energy shifted, subtle, but unmistakable. The set, lit with aggressive reds and cool blues, buzzed with anticipation. Piers was already seated, smirking into the camera, fingers steepled like a villain waiting to pounce. He knew this wasn't going to be a fluffy celebrity interview. He didn't want that. He wanted fire. He wanted to provoke. "Ladies and gentlemen," Piers said to the live audience and viewers across the country, "tonight, a man who needs no introduction, though I'll give him one anyway. Actor, activist, preacher when it suits him, Mr. Denzel Washington." Applause. But not wild. Tense. Curious. Denzel walked in calmly, a dark navy suit, no tie, just presence. His face was unreadable, no smile, no scowl, just stillness. He took his seat across from Piers and nodded, "Let's talk." That's when Piers leaned in, already sharpening his claws. "You've made a habit recently," Piers began, "of entering political spaces and acting as if morality gives you authority. Do you believe your fame entitles you to speak for Americans?" Denzel raised an eyebrow. "I don't speak for anyone, Piers," he said evenly. "But I speak to them. That's the difference." The studio shifted again. Tension. Static. Piers smiled, thin and cold. "You say that, but let's be honest, people listen to you like you're some kind of prophet. Maybe it's time someone challenged that." Denzel didn't blink. "That's why I came." Boom. Round 1. Ding. Behind the glass, the producers exchanged glances. They'd expected sparks, but this wasn't just heat, it was precision. Piers continued, undeterred. "Some say you're playing the victim card lately. That you walk into rooms demanding respect, but not earning it." Denzel leaned back slightly, voice low but surgical. "When truth makes people uncomfortable, they call it victimhood. Convenient label when they don't want to face themselves." Piers blinked. The audience stilled. And for a second, even he didn't have a comeback. The opening salvo had been fired, and it wasn't loud. It was lethal. Piers Morgan, not one to be rattled for long, forced a grin and adjusted his cufflinks as if to shake off the moment. He leaned in with that trademark smugness, the kind that suggested he was just getting started. "Well," he said, tapping his notes, "if you're done sermonizing, maybe we can address something else. You criticize systems, institutions, even the people running them, but never offer real solutions. Isn't that the easy way out? Complain. Disappear. Appear righteous." Denzel didn't flinch. His gaze was fixed, almost still, but behind it was something ancient, like a storm that didn't need thunder to be dangerous. "I don't give people answers, Piers," he said. "I ask them questions they're too scared to answer." Piers chuckled, theatrically. How convenient. The preacher who never has to be held accountable. The room grew colder. "I'm held accountable every time I walk into a room like this," Denzel said, "where truth is entertainment and deflection is the currency." The audience was now completely silent, hooked on every word. Piers pressed on. "You recently walked into a political rally and challenged the speaker, without an invitation. Many called it a stunt. Others said you weaponized your fame. Did you?" Denzel's eyes narrowed just slightly. "No. I walked into a space that claims to belong to the people. Turns out, it only belongs to the people who clap on command." That hit. Piers blinked, the smile slipping. "So it was disruption?" he asked. "No," Denzel replied. "It was a reminder." "Of what?" Piers asked, now agitated. "That truth doesn't ask permission." For a moment, all you could hear were the camera lenses whirring. Denzel's tone had not risen once, but the tension in the studio was approaching a breaking point. Piers tried to pivot. "You've also spoken about faith quite a bit. In fact, some say you use it as a shield. As a way to silence criticism. Denzel leaned forward now, elbows on the table, voice ironclad. I don't use faith as a shield. I use it as a mirror. If it reflects something ugly in people, maybe they should ask themselves why. A low whoa escaped from someone in the audience. Another person whispered, "Did you hear that?" Piers sat back, momentarily stunned. He had expected fire, but not a scalpel. And Denzel was just getting started. At this point, Piers Morgan knew he was no longer moderating a conversation, he was surviving one. He glanced briefly off camera, as if silently pleading with the producers for a shift in topic, a well-timed break, anything. But nothing came. It was just him, Denzel, and a studio audience that had stopped blinking. "Let me ask you something personal," Piers said finally, reaching deep into his folder. "Why do you think people always take your side? You speak slowly, act calm, you come off wise, but maybe it's all performance. Maybe you're just a better actor than the rest of us." Denzel didn't respond right away. He tilted his head slightly, as if examining not the question, but the man who had asked it. "Let me ask you something, Piers," he said quietly. "Why does calm make you uncomfortable?" The question hung in the air like smoke. "You come from a world where volume equals power," Denzel continued, "where winning means interrupting, insulting, spinning. But I was raised in a world where silence was survival. Where stillness was strength. And if that unsettles you, maybe it should." The audience erupted, not in applause, but in hushed murmurs, wide eyes, dropped jaws. Piers shifted in his seat, his smirk now gone. "So you're saying my entire profession is the problem?" "I'm saying," Denzel replied, "that when a man listens only to respond, he stops hearing. That's not journalism. That's ego." It was brutal. Not shouted, not performed. Just true. Piers tried to recover. "You keep talking about truth as if it's yours to hand out." "No," Denzel said. "Truth is free. I just choose not to sell it." The crowd stirred again. And then, without warning, Denzel turned toward the audience for the first time. "You all came here to watch a show," he said. "That's fine. But don't forget to think. Don't forget to feel. And don't ever let someone with a microphone tell you what your country should mean to you." It wasn't loud. It wasn't long. But it hit harder than anything all night. Piers sat frozen. Denzel had taken the room, and he hadn't even stood up. The studio remained suspended in a kind of electricity, one foot in entertainment, the other now clearly in something far deeper. Piers Morgan, cornered but defiant, crossed his legs and leaned back with a calculated scoff. "Well, Denzel," he said, voice taut, "you've certainly made yourself comfortable here. But don't confuse polite applause with agreement. You may have fooled this crowd, but not everyone buys your righteous act." Denzel didn't blink. "I'm not selling anything, Piers," he said, voice low and exact. "You just don't recognize conviction because it's not wrapped in sarcasm." That stung. The audience rippled with quiet laughter, not mocking, but real. Piers leaned forward again, tone sharpening. "Tell me then, Mr. Conviction, where does your courage go when people disagree with you? Where was it when you stayed silent during those black-on-black crime spikes? When innocent cops were dragged into politics?" It was a line designed to provoke, and everyone in the room felt it. Denzel inhaled slowly, exhaled with precision. "You don't get to pick which grief I carry publicly," he said. "I mourn in private. I act in the shadows. Just because I don't scream on command doesn't mean I'm not doing the work." Piers cut in, "That's convenient." "No," Denzel said, suddenly sharper, cutting through. "Convenient is throwing out dog whistles and hiding behind your British passport while American communities burn." The room froze. Piers paled slightly. That hit harder than he expected. You wanted heat? Denzel continued, eyes locked on him. Here it is. You poke the pain and expect performance. But I'm not a monologue. I'm a memory. Of a country that keeps asking black men to bleed in silence just to keep others comfortable. There was no applause. No movement. Just a thick, overwhelming stillness. Piers cleared his throat, suddenly small in his own chair. You say all that, he muttered, and yet you keep coming on shows like this. Denzel looked him dead in the eyes. I come here so the truth shows up where lies usually sit. And that was the moment. The audience didn't clap, they couldn't. They just stared, absorbing it. Piers had crossed a line. Denzel had redrawn it. And everyone watching knew it. Backstage, producers whispered urgently into headsets. The control room debated whether to cut to commercial. But no one dared. What was unfolding live was no longer just a segment, it was a reckoning. Piers Morgan, visibly rattled, tried to compose himself. He flipped through his notes aimlessly, pretending to search for a question that would reassert his dominance. But his rhythm was gone. The ground beneath him had shifted. Denzel Washington, still unmoved, sat upright like a lighthouse in a storm, calm, steady, immovable. You said something a moment ago, Piers finally managed, his voice tight, about bleeding in silence. Isn't that just more division? More victimhood? America needs unity, not more narratives of pain. A gasp escaped from someone in the audience. Denzel's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in precision. Victimhood, he said, repeating the word like a scalpel. Let me explain something to you, Piers. People don't choose to be victims. They choose to survive despite it. What you call division, I call testimony. And if my story makes you uncomfortable, it's doing its job. He leaned in slightly, hands clasped. Unity doesn't start with ignoring pain. It starts with acknowledging it. The crowd murmured again, deeper this time. Piers tried to push back. But don't you think constantly revisiting the past traps us there? No, Denzel replied. Pretending it never happened is what traps us. It was quiet again. The kind of quiet that demands attention. Denzel let the silence sit, he wasn't afraid of it. Then he spoke again, this time to the room, not just to Piers. People want healing, but they skip the truth part. You can't heal what you won't admit is broken. A single clap echoed from the back. Another. Then another. Within seconds, the audience, cautiously, almost reverently, rose to their feet. Not cheering. Not roaring. Just, standing. Piers sat frozen, watching a moment he didn't create, couldn't control, and clearly didn't understand. Denzel looked around, nodded once, then folded his hands in his lap. He had taken the studio. Not with volume. With presence. Piers Morgan sat stiff, his fingers nervously tapping against his notepad. The applause had ended, but the weight of it still lingered like a storm that had passed yet left the air thick. Desperate to reclaim the show's tempo, he forced a smirk and leaned toward Denzel. You do this well, he said with feigned levity. Steal a stage without raising your voice. But let's be honest, this isn't a church, and you're not a preacher. Denzel didn't even look at him. He looked toward the camera. America doesn't need a preacher, he said. It needs a mirror. That one sentence hit harder than any monologue Piers had ever written in his career. The room tensed again, drawn in tighter. You ask why I speak the way I do, Denzel continued. It's because yelling is what they expect. It's what gets dismissed. But stillness? That scares people. Because it means I'm not reacting. I'm watching. Piers bit his lip. So now you're saying you're above the game? No, Denzel said. I'm just tired of playing it. A woman in the third row whispered audibly to her friend, "He's not playing. He's rewriting it." Piers heard it. His face twitched. "Let's get real, Denzel," he snapped, breaking the formality. "You're beloved in Hollywood, respected in politics, and now you want to be a prophet too?" "I don't need to be a prophet," Denzel replied. "I just refuse to be a puppet." That line landed like a punch. Even the cameraman blinked. The studio walls, once filled with Piers' rhythm and flow, were now wrapped in a different tempo, slower, sharper, more surgical. "You brought me here hoping for a spectacle," Denzel said plainly. "But what you got was a mirror. And maybe you don't like what you see." Silence again. But this time, it wasn't just reverent, it was shaken. Piers leaned back, for the first time truly unsure of what came next. The show wasn't his anymore. And he knew it. Piers Morgan's lips tightened into a forced smirk. His signature weapon, sarcasm, was losing its edge. He adjusted his blazer, shot a glance to the control booth, then leaned in one last time. "You keep talking about truth, Denzel," he said, voice low. "But let's talk about ego. You came here knowing exactly what kind of ripple you wanted to make. You hijacked the room with theater, not truth." Denzel didn't flinch. He simply smiled. "Truth doesn't hijack," he said. "It reveals. And what you're feeling right now, that's not me stealing the spotlight. That's the room realizing it didn't need your spotlight to see clearly." A low "whoa" swept the crowd. Piers' eyes darted toward the audience, then back to Denzel. "You're romanticizing yourself," Piers fired back. "This isn't a speech contest, it's a conversation. And I still get to ask the questions." Denzel nodded slowly. "Ask better ones, then." That line cracked the tension wide open. The audience didn't just laugh, they responded. The applause wasn't just for the burn, it was for the shift. For the courage. One man in the second row stood up, clapped once, and said, "That's what we came for." A few others followed. The tide had turned. Piers Morgan, the man used to owning the room, was now the guest. His face hardened. "This isn't your pulpit, Denzel. This is my platform." Denzel leaned back. "Then maybe you should have built it better." The audience exploded. Standing ovation. Phones out. Social media already buzzing. Producers scrambled behind the glass. A junior staffer mouthed, "We're trending." Denzel remained still. No smugness. No showboating. Just presence. That was what shook Piers most. He had thrown every jab, every deflection, every power move. And Denzel had answered all of it without leaving his chair. The live feed numbers had tripled in under 5 minutes. Twitter was ablaze. Trending tags like #DenzelOwnsPiers and #SilentStrength overtook the feed. Clips were already going viral before the segment had even wrapped. Inside the studio, Piers Morgan adjusted in his chair again, his composure slipping like ice under sunlight. His usual control had fractured. What was left was not a host guiding a narrative, but a man struggling to regain relevance. "You know what I think, Denzel," he said, voice colder now. "You've spent your whole career pretending to be other people. Maybe you've forgotten who you actually are." The crowd groaned. Denzel blinked once. Then twice. Then finally leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes locked. "You're confusing acting with integrity," he said slowly. "And between the two of us, only one of us is pretending right now." Boom. The energy shifted again. Piers opened his mouth, but the words wouldn't come. The audience could feel it. The producers could feel it. And worst of all, for Piers, he could feel it. This wasn't just a bad night. This was a televised unraveling. "I didn't come here to be celebrated," Denzel continued. I came here because I'm tired of people like you acting like the mic gives you wisdom. It doesn't. It just makes your ignorance louder. The crowd erupted. Not with chaos, but with conviction. People were standing. Cheering. Not for a celebrity moment, but for a truth they hadn't heard in too long. Piers leaned back, red in the face, trying to laugh it off. You think you're so righteous? No, Denzel said, shaking his head. Just not afraid. In the control room, the executive producer clutched his headset, voice sharp. Do we cut? Delay? Do something. But no one moved. They all knew, stopping it now would only make it worse. This wasn't a mistake, it was a moment. And moments like this come once in a decade. Back on stage, Piers Morgan was flailing, internally, if not yet outwardly. His rhythm had dissolved completely. What had started as a power play had become a live unraveling. He reached for a final defense, reputation. You think you're speaking for the people? He barked. They didn't elect you, Denzel. They didn't vote for you to speak. I didn't ask for permission, Denzel replied, voice steady. I just recognized the silence. The room held its breath again. And someone had to fill it. That line, it landed hard. Not like a punch, but like a weight. Heavy. Honest. A young producer in the back whispered, "This is history." Outside the building, a crowd was already forming. People had started gathering on the sidewalks, holding up phones, watching through the studio windows. The word was out, something real was happening inside. On air, Piers tried one last spin. You're not the voice of truth. You're just a man with a fan base. And you're just a man with a microphone, Denzel answered. But the difference is, people can turn me off. That hit like a final verdict. The crowd didn't explode this time. They rose. Together. A unified, quiet standing ovation. Not for show. For respect. Piers sat in it, cornered by nothing more than truth, delivered without theatrics, without shouting, without shame. Just presence. The next morning, the moment was everywhere. The segment had been clipped, remixed, shared, dissected, and translated into 5 languages within 12 hours. TikTok edits poured in. Headlines dominated every feed. Denzel doesn't raise his voice, he raises the bar. Piers Morgan loses his own show, Denzel Washington just took the mic. This is what speaking power to power looks like. On a small couch in his Los Angeles home, Denzel sat with a cup of black coffee, scrolling through texts. His inbox read like a who's who of Hollywood, Washington, and even Wall Street. But the one message he reread twice was from a teacher in Milwaukee. I showed your clip in class. My students, half of them don't even watch the news, asked to watch it again. He smiled, quietly. That was the goal all along, not to trend, not to dominate a segment, but to plant a thought that couldn't be ignored. Meanwhile, back in the UK, Piers Morgan's team was scrambling. He hadn't posted since the taping. His PR director recommended silence. Let it pass, she said. But it wasn't passing. It was spreading. The clip had become a symbol of something bigger, an exhaustion with noise, with fake debates, with performative outrage. Denzel hadn't just dismantled a host, he had exposed a format. Later that night, on CNN, a panel of commentators tried to unpack the moment. One of them, a former speechwriter, put it simply. Piers tried to corner Denzel with a script. But Denzel brought the truth. And truth doesn't need a script. Backstage at the same studio days later, a young intern stared at the empty chair where Denzel had sat. Something changed, she whispered. And maybe that's what Denzel wanted all along. If this story moved you, if it made you pause, reflect, or just listen, then that's what matters. Denzel didn't raise his voice, he raised a mirror. In a world full of noise, sometimes silence wrapped in clarity speaks the loudest. Subscribe for more stories that don't just entertain, but challenge. Because the truth doesn't need a script. It just needs someone brave enough to speak it. Not to win a debate, but to remind the country that some voices still speak with purpose. Not volume.